The night was cold. The wind cut through the streets like a knife. The city of ChangedHis, on the edge of the alien frontier, never slept, but it never smiled either. The towers stood tall and dark, covered with metal frost. Neon lights flickered, but they gave no warmth. People hurried through the alleys, covering their faces. Not because of shame, but because of the icy air that burned the skin. Among them walked a human. His name was Elias. He had no family here, no home, and no future. His jacket was old and torn, barely holding together. His boots had holes, and the ground's cold bit into his feet. In his pocket lay one small coin, a single credit. His last one. He stopped in front of a vendor stall. Steam rose from hot broth inside a pot. The smell made his stomach twist. He had not eaten a real meal in 2 days. His body begged for food. His hand reached toward his pocket. He could trade the credit for a bowl of soup, maybe even a piece of bread. Enough to live one more night. But then he saw her, across the street. Near the corner of a crumbling building, sat an alien woman. Her skin was pale blue, glowing faintly under the weak streetlight. Her hair was silver, long, but messy from the wind. She was not alone. 2 small children pressed against her sides. Their bodies shook from the cold. Their eyes were wide, not from hunger alone, but from fear. She was a widow. Everyone in this district knew it. Her mate had died in the last border war, leaving her with nothing but 2 young mouths to feed. She begged sometimes, but most people walked past her. No one wanted to be seen helping an alien widow. It brought trouble. The soldiers disliked it. The merchants disliked it. Even the poor disliked it. For kindness was a luxury no one could afford. Elias watched her pull a thin piece of cloth tighter around her children. It was no real blanket, just scraps. Their teeth chattered. Their bodies curled into each other, trying to steal warmth from the air that held none. Elias turned back to the soup stall. His stomach cried louder now. He could eat and maybe last another day. If he didn't, maybe his body would give up by tomorrow. He knew it. His head spun with weakness. He looked again at the widow. Her children's eyes caught his. Big, bright, and trembling. They didn't beg. They didn't speak. But their silence screamed louder than any words. Elias felt his hand tighten around the credit. Just 1 coin. The last piece of his life. Slowly, he turned away from the food stall. He walked down the street, past glowing signs and rusted doors, until he reached another stall. This one sold blankets thin, rough ones made from cheap fiber. Nothing special, but better than scraps. The seller looked at him with suspicion. Humans rarely bought blankets in this part of town. But Elias placed the coin on the counter. His last credit slid away from him like a final breath. The seller frowned, but handed him a folded blanket. It was not heavy, not warm enough for deep winter, but it was something. Elias held it in his hands and felt the weight of his choice. Hunger pressed inside his stomach, but something stronger pressed inside his chest. He walked across the street and stopped in front of the widow. For a moment, she looked up at him, unsure if he would spit at her, curse her, or simply pass by. Humans did not usually stop for her, but Elias knelt down and placed the blanket over her children. The fabric covered their small shoulders, their shaking arms. At once, they clung to it, their tiny fingers gripping as if it was treasure. The widow gasped softly. Her silver eyes widened, shining not from light but from tears that froze at the edges. You? Her voice trembled, broken. Why? Elias only shook his head. He had no answer. He had no reason that made sense in this cruel place. The widow reached out as if to stop him, but he was already standing. Already walking away. The wind grew stronger. His stomach groaned again, but he ignored it. Behind him, he heard the soft sobs of the widow. The quiet whispers of thanks carried by the icy wind. He did not look back. The night swallowed him. His body was weak, but in his chest burned a strange fire, small but real. He had given away his last chance at life for a moment of kindness. Would it save him? Would it destroy him? Only the cold, endless night of Kerith knew the answer. The night passed like a cruel test. Elias sat in his broken shelter, a rusted box once meant for storage, now his only home. The wind found every crack. His bones shook. His stomach burned with hunger. He had nothing left. No food, no money, not even hope. But he did not regret the blanket. When he closed his eyes, he still saw them, the two small children curling under its cover, their little bodies no longer shaking as much. And above them, the widow's face. Her eyes, they were not just alien eyes. They were not just blue and silver like the frozen stars above. They carried something humans, something ancient, a mixture of surprise, pain, and gratitude. A question that words could not ask, and yet Elias felt it deep inside. Why would you do this for me? He had no answer, even for himself. The shelter door rattled. A sound, soft, careful. Elias froze. In this district, visitors at night meant danger, thieves, soldiers, debt collectors. He reached for the small piece of metal he used as a knife. His fingers trembled. Another knock, gentle, not like a soldier's boot, more like a hand asking permission. Slowly, Elias pushed the door open. There she was. The alien widow. The silver-haired woman he had seen in the street. Her children were not with her. In her hands, she carried something small wrapped in cloth. For a moment, they just stared at each other. The wind whistled behind her. Her voice was quiet, almost carried away by the night. "I bring this." She held out the bundle. Elias hesitated. Then he opened the cloth. Inside was food. Not much. A piece of dried meat, a root vegetable, and a small flask of warm broth. Elias looked at it, then at her. His throat closed. "You gave your last coin," she whispered. "Now I give what little I have." Elias wanted to refuse, but the smell of the broth was too much. His body betrayed him. His hands shook as he lifted it to his lips. Warmth spread through him for the first time in days. He drank slowly, as if each drop was life itself. The widow stepped inside without asking. She sat on the floor, across from him. The shelter was small, barely space for one. Yet she folded her arms and pulled her knees close, as if she belonged here. For a long time, they said nothing. The city's noise was far away. Only the sound of wind outside and the slow breaths inside. Finally, she spoke again. "My name is Sira." Elias nodded. He was not used to names anymore. People in the streets rarely gave them. Names were dangerous. "Names made you real. You are human," she said, as if testing the word. "Yes." His voice cracked. She studied him. Not like the others did. Not with suspicion or anger. Her gaze was searching, curious, then soft. "Humans do not stay here long," she said. "They fight. They trade. They leave." "Why are you here?" Elias had no answer. He had come to this world chasing a promise of work, chasing a rumor of safety. Both had been lies. Now he was here with nothing. Sira did not press him. She only nodded, as if she understood silence better than words. The hours passed. The cold pressed in, but somehow, with her there, the space felt warmer. Elias realized he was staring at her eyes again, not because of her alien beauty, but because they carried something rare: trust. When she finally stood, preparing to leave, she placed her hand on the blanket around her shoulders. "You gave my children warmth," she said. "I will not forget." Her silver eyes locked on his one last time. Then she slipped into the night, the door closing softly behind her. Elias sat alone, holding the empty flask. For the first time in years, his chest ached, not from hunger, but from something different. Something he thought he had lost long ago. Hope, but along with it came fear. Because he knew this city. He knew its rules. And he knew that kindness, especially between a human and an alien widow, was never safe. The wind outside howled louder, like a warning, and Elias wondered, what will her eyes bring me tomorrow? Life or death? The days in ChangedHis moved like shadows, slow, heavy, and cold. For Elias, every sunrise was just another reminder of hunger. He lived between silence and frost, waiting for an end he no longer feared. But ever since that night, when the alien widow came to his door with food, something had changed. Not much, just a small spark. A memory. The memory of her eyes silver, watching him not with pity, not with hate, but with something else. Something he had not felt in years. Gratitude. He told himself it was nothing. Just a single night, a single gift, and it would end there. The city had no place for kindness, especially not between a human and one of her kind. Yet 3 nights later, when the wind screamed loudest, the sound returned. A knock, not a soldier's hammer, not a thief's fist. No, it was soft, careful, the same as before. Elias froze. His body still remembered hunger, but now it remembered fear too. If someone had seen her visit, if someone had followed her, this knock could be a trap. His hand moved to the metal shard he kept at his side. Slowly, with breath caught in his throat, he pushed the door open. There she was, Sira, the silver-haired widow. Her face half hidden under a hood, her hands carrying a small bundle again. But this time, when she stepped inside, she did not ask permission. She walked in as if the space was no longer his alone. Elias closed the door, his heart pounding. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. "People will see. People will talk." Sira placed the bundle down between them. "Let them talk," she said simply. Inside the cloth lay more food. Roots, bread, even a strip of cooked meat. The smell filled the air, making Elias's stomach twist. He tried to resist, tried to remember his warnings, but his body gave in. He ate, slowly at first, then faster, like a man starved. Sira only watched. Her eyes soft but steady. "You gave my children warmth," she said. "Now I give you strength." Elias stopped, his mouth still full. He wanted to argue, to tell her she owed him nothing. But the words caught in his throat. Because deep inside, he wanted to believe it that, maybe, in this broken city, kindness was still real. For a long time, they sat in silence. The wind outside was cruel, but inside the little shelter, it was almost calm. Then Sira spoke again, her voice low. "You do not belong here, human. You are not safe." Elias gave a bitter laugh. "Safe? No one is safe here." Her silver eyes searched his face. Then why stay? He had no answer. He had once dreamed of work, of credits, of building a new life. But those dreams had frozen long ago. Now he stayed because he had nowhere else to go. Sira seemed to understand, even without his words. She leaned closer, her voice almost a whisper. "When I saw you in the street that night, I thought you were another shadow, empty, lost. But you chose to give even when you had nothing. That is not what shadows do." Elias looked away. Her words struck deeper than hunger ever had. He had given without thinking, and yet it had changed everything. A sudden noise outside broke the moment. Heavy boots on stone. Voices, angry, harsh. Soldier Sira stiffened. Her hand moved to the door, but Elias caught her wrist. "Stay." They both held their breath as the voices passed by, fading into the distance. Only then did she relax, though her eyes held fear. "They watch me," she whispered. "They know I am alone. They wait for weakness." Elias frowned. "And you came here anyway." Sira nodded slowly. "Because weakness is not always weakness. Sometimes it is courage." Her words hung in the air like fire in the cold. Elias felt something inside him shift. The walls of his shelter were broken, but in that moment it no longer felt empty. When she finally stood to leave, she placed her hand lightly on his shoulder. Not long, just a touch. But it was enough to leave warmth behind. She pulled her hood tighter and slipped. Into the night without a sound, Elias sat in the silence she left, his heart still beating too fast. The city outside was cruel, but inside him something had awakened. Something dangerous, because for the first time he wanted her to knock again. The days after the second visit were not the same. Elias noticed it first in the silence. It no longer felt empty. It carried memory. The memory of her silver eyes, the sound of her quiet voice, the warmth of her hand on his shoulder. In the broken shelter, he still froze at night. He still starved most days. But now, when he closed his eyes, he saw something more than shadows. He saw Sira, and he hated himself for wanting her to return. Because wanting was dangerous, and yet she came back. Not once, not twice. Many times. Sometimes with food, sometimes with nothing. Only herself. Each time she entered as if the shelter belonged to them both. Each time she spoke little. But her presence filled the space more than words ever could. One evening, she brought a piece of cloth sewn from scraps. She placed it on the floor, smoothing it out. A mat. Something soft to sit on. Elias laughed at the thought of softness in the city, but she only smiled. For a moment, the shelter felt less like a prison and more like a home. It was strange. How silence between them became a kind of language. Elias did not need to ask about her life. He could read it in the lines of her face. In the tired way her hands moved, in the way her eyes lingered on shadows outside the door. But one night, she spoke more than usual. "My mate died in the war," she said quietly, as if telling the wall instead of him. "They promised medals, promised honor, promised care. But honor does not feed children." Elias listened, saying nothing. He knew words of comfort would be useless. He knew loss himself. He had lost family long before coming to this frozen world. He had lost dreams. He had lost pieces of himself. "My children ask for stories," Sarah continued. Her voice was steady, but her hands twisted in her lap. "Stories of their father. I tell them he was strong, brave. I do not tell them he died screaming." Her eyes flickered toward Elias. And for the first time, he saw not just pain, but guilt. "I am tired of lying," she whispered. Elias shifted closer, though the space was already small. He spoke slowly, carefully. "Then tell them this. Tell them their father left them with a mother strong enough to survive, strong enough to fight every day for them." The words surprised him. He was not used to saying such things. But they came out before he could stop them. Sira's eyes softened. Her lips trembled as if she wanted to answer, but couldn't. The silence that followed was heavier, but not cold. It was filled with something else. Something fragile, trust. From then on, their meetings changed. No longer just food or survival. Sometimes Sarah brought her children, two small faces peeking shyly from behind her. At first, they feared Elias, but slowly they grew used to him. One even laughed when he made a clumsy joke, his voice rusty from disuse. In those moments, Elias felt something he thought was long gone. A piece of humanity, a piece of belonging. But the city was not blind. One evening, as Elias walked the street, he noticed eyes watching him. harsh, narrow eyes of locals. Soldiers standing at corners, their hands near their weapons. Whispers followed him, words half-hidden but sharp, human. Widow, traitor. Danger was building, like ice cracking under weight. Elias felt it, but he said nothing. He told himself he could bear it as long as Sarah kept knocking, as long as her children kept smiling. One night, as she prepared to leave, Elias finally asked the question that had been burning inside him. Why me? His voice was raw, almost broken. Why do you come here? You risk everything. Sarah stood by the door, her hood half raised. For a long time she did not answer. Then, slowly, she turned back. Her silver eyes met his. And in them, Elias saw no pity, no duty, no debt. Only something deeper. Because, she whispered, you are as alone as I am. The door closed softly behind her. Elias sat in the darkness, her words echoing inside him. He had thought himself empty, forgotten. But now he realized emptiness was not his alone. They shared it. Two lonely souls finding warmth in each other's silence. And that, he feared, was more dangerous than hunger. The city of Cherith had no need for gossip, lived on it. Whispers moved faster than wind, slipping through alleys and across markets like smoke. And soon Elias felt them closing in on him. At first, it was small things. The bread seller staring too long when Sarah placed coins on his counter. A soldier pausing his patrol when Elias passed by. Neighbors pulling their children closer, as if a human shadow could stain them. Then came the words. Not shouted, not spoken to his face, but breathed behind his back. Human stray. Widow's fool. Feeding on pity. Words like knives, sharp enough to cut without ever drawing blood. Elias tried to ignore them. Tried to tell himself he had survived worse. But each whisper carried weight. And each weight pressed heavier on Sarah. One night, when she came to his shelter, he saw it in her eyes. The silver glow was dimmer, clouded by fear. They are watching, she said. Her voice was low, almost a breath. When I walk in the market, they turn away. When my children laugh, they frown, they wait. They wait for me to break a rule. Elias clenched his fists. Because of me, Sarah shook her head. Because of us, the words struck him like thunder. Us, until then. He had thought of himself as separate, an outsider, leaning on her kindness. But Sarah's eyes told him otherwise. To the city, they were not two souls, they were one. And one was enough to make them enemies. Elias tried to laugh it off. They don't scare me, but Sarah's gaze held no humor. They should. That night, she left early. No food, no warmth, only the weight of her warning. Elias lay awake, staring at the cracks in the ceiling. He had thought hunger was his worst enemy. But hunger only killed the body. Whispers could kill the spirit. Days passed. The air around him grew colder, not from weather, but from stares. Elias began to notice shadows trailing him. Soldiers moving slower when he walked by. He felt the trap tightening, but still, when Sarah knocked, he opened the door. One evening, her children came with her again. They brought laughter into the broken shelter, their giggles soft and shy. Elias carved a toy from scrap metal, rough but shiny, and placed it in their hands. Their smiles lit the room brighter than any lantern. But outside, in the darkness, Elias knew someone was watching. He could feel the weight of unseen eyes later that night. After the children slept under the blanket, Sarah spoke. They will not let this last, she said. They will not forgive me for needing you. They will not forgive you for helping me. Elias leaned forward. Then I'll leave. I'll go far. You'll be safe. Her head snapped up, eyes blazing with something sharp. Safe. Without you, I will still be hunted. With you, at least I am not alone. Her words silenced him. He realized then that safety was an illusion in Cherith. She had lived without safety for years. What she had found with him was not protection, but presence. And presence mattered more than safety. Still, fear crawled in Elias's chest. Not for himself, but for her. For the children. That night, he lay awake, listening to every sound outside: the crunch of boots, the rattle of doors, the whispers that seemed to float even through walls. In the distance, someone shouted. A fight broke out. Metal clashed against stone. Elias knew what it meant. Another human beaten, another body thrown into the frost. His kind were tolerated only when useful. He was not useful. He thought of Sira's children, their small hands gripping the toy he had given. He thought of her eyes, silver like frozen fire. And for the first time, Elias wished not just to survive, but to fight. But fight what? Hunger could be beaten. Cold could be endured. Whispers? Whispers could not be touched. Whispers killed in silence. The next morning, he walked through the market. He kept his head down, but still, he heard them. The words curled around him like smoke. The human sleeps with her. He eats her food. He hides in her shadow. When he passed a group of soldiers, one spat at his feet. The others laughed. Elias did not stop, did not look. But inside, the fire grew hotter. That night, when Sira came again, she did not smile. She did not bring food. She only sat beside him in silence. The air was heavy. Even the children seemed to sense it, curling into the blanket without a word. At last, she whispered, "They will come soon." Elias turned to her, his voice low but steady. Then let them. For a long moment, their eyes held. No fear, no regret. Only the quiet truth that two lonely souls had already chosen each other despite the whispers. Despite the danger, and in the distance, beyond the frost and neon lights. The city prepared to test them. The storm broke on a moonless night. The city of Cherith seemed quieter than usual. Its alleys strangely empty. No children running, no merchants shouting, no laughter. Only boots. Heavy boots echoing through the frozen streets like a drumbeat of war. Soldiers were moving not in twos, not in threes, but in packs. Inside his broken shelter, Elias felt it before he heard it. The air shifted, heavy and tight, as if the night itself was holding its breath. Sira was there with him, her children curled beneath the blanket he had given. She held them close, whispering stories to calm their fear. But Elias's fear was louder. The knock came not gentle, not careful. A fist, hard, commanding. Sira's eyes widened. Elias froze. Open. A voice barked from outside. Cold, sharp, the voice of someone used to being obeyed. The children whimpered. Elias's hand moved to the shard of metal he kept as a weapon, but Sira caught his wrist. Her grip was strong, her eyes fierce. No. If you fight, they kill you. Hide. Elias's throat tightened. Hide where? Sira didn't answer with words. She pulled back the floor mat she had sewn from scraps, revealing a loose panel beneath. A hollow space, small, dark, barely large enough for one man. They'll search. Elias hissed. They won't if I stall them, she whispered back. Trust me. The fist slammed against the door again. Last warning. Elias's mind spun. He wanted to argue, to refuse, but her eyes left no room for doubt. Those silver eyes, always calm, always steady now, burned with fire. He crawled into the hollow. The panel shut above him. Darkness swallowed him whole. The door crashed open, boots stormed inside. Elias could hear everything: the crack of wood, the sharp breaths of soldiers, the frightened gasp of children. Where is he? The soldier barked. Sira's voice came steady despite the fear he knew she felt. Who? Don T. Play Games, Widow. The human? He's been seen with you. We know he hides here. I have nothing, she said. Her tone was flat, hard. Only children. A heavy silence. Then the sound of metal swords, maybe rifles, drawn. Elias's chest tightened in the dark. His hand gripped his useless shard of metal, sweat freezing on his skin. The soldiers searched. Boots scraped across the floor. Pots overturned. Cloth torn. Elias held his breath as one set of footsteps stopped above him. A pause, then a kick hard against the panel. The hollow rattled. Elias's heart hammered. This was it. They would find him. But then Sira's voice rose. Not loud, but sharp. Enough. Do you take joy in scaring children? He is not here. Look for him in the gutters where humans belong. The soldier laughed, cruel and short. Another spat. Careful, widow. Protecting a human can cost you more than food. Silence stretched. Then, finally, the boots retreated. The door slammed shut behind them. Elias lay in the dark, his chest burning from holding his breath. Minutes passed like hours. Only when the silence felt real did the panel slide open. Sira's face appeared above him. Pale and tired, but her eyes still fierce. She offered her hand. He climbed out, his body shaking. The children clung to her, their eyes wide with terror. You risked everything, Elias whispered, his voice breaking. Sira looked at him as if the answer was obvious. So did you, the night you gave your last coin. For a moment, Elias could not speak. His throat closed. He realized then what he had seen in her eyes all along. It was not just gratitude, not just survival. It was something deeper, something that bound them beyond hunger, beyond fear. Love, the word, terrified him more than the soldiers, because love was not safe. Love was not smart. Love was a betrayal to the city, to its rules, to survival itself. But as she stood there, holding her children, staring at him with silver eyes that burned brighter than the frost, Elias knew he could not step back from it. The whispers were no longer whispers. The soldiers had come, and they would come again. But Elias also knew something else. He would not run. Not anymore. That night, while the city slept under frozen skies, a human and an alien widow stood together in the ruins of a broken shelter. Betrayed by the world around them, bound by a love they had never asked for. They chose the most dangerous path of each other. The night after the soldiers came, the city did not sleep. Neither did Elias. He sat awake in the shelter, listening to every sound outside: the scrape of boots, the howl of wind, the distant shouts of drunken men. Each noise carried a question. Will they return? Will they take her children? Will they drag me into the frost? But when he looked at Sira, when he saw her arms wrapped around her children, when he saw the fire in her silver eyes, he knew the greater danger was not outside. It was inside him. A danger called love. Love made him reckless. Love made him stay. And love was the one thing the city of Cherith would never forgive by morning. The decision was clear. We can't remain here, Elias said, his voice low but firm. The whispers have grown too loud. The soldiers will return. Sira said nothing. She only pulled the blanket tighter around her children. Elias moved closer. If we wait, they will break down the door. They'll take me. Maybe worse, they'll punish you for helping me. Finally, Sira looked up. Her face was pale, her hair tangled, but her eyes burned steady. Then, where do we go? The city has no place for us. Elias hesitated. He had no plan, no map, no promise. All he had was will. Out there, he said, nodding toward the wastelands beyond the walls. It's cold. It's hard. But it's free. Sira stared at him as if testing his words. Her children clung to her arms, their faces tired, but their small hands gripped hers with trust. At last, she nodded. Then we leave. They moved at dusk, when the neon lights flickered and shadows stretched across the alleys. Elias carried what little they owned, the mat, a flask, scraps of food. Sira walked beside him, her children wrapped in the blanket. Together, they slipped through the city's veins, unseen but not unnoticed. Eyes followed them. Whispers trailed like smoke. But no one spoke aloud. No one dared. The soldiers had taught the city silence. At the gates, Elias's heart pounded. Guards stood watch, their rifles gleaming. For a moment, he thought it was over, that they would be caught before freedom even began. But luck, or fate, or something greater, was with them. A caravan arrived, wagons loaded with coal. In the confusion, shadows moved. Elias grabbed Sira's hand, pulling her into the flow. They passed through the gates like ghosts. Then they were outside. The wasteland stretched endless, a sea of ice and broken stone. The wind was sharp enough to cut skin. The sky glowed faintly with frozen stars. Death lived out here. But so did freedom. They walked. Hours passed, feet sinking into snow, breaths turning to frost. The children grew tired, their small bodies heavy in Sira's arms. Elias took turns carrying them, though his legs trembled from weakness. Still, they walked. When night fell, they found shelter in the ruins of an old watchtower, half buried in snow. It was broken, but strong enough to shield them from the wind. They lit a small fire from scraps of wood. The flames were weak, but they danced, casting light on faces weary yet alive. The children huddled close, their eyes heavy with sleep. Sira pulled the blanket around them and looked at Elias. "You gave us warmth once," she said softly. "Now you give us freedom." Elias shook his head. "No, you gave me warmth. You gave me a reason." For a long time, they sat in silence, watching the fire. The wasteland outside was cruel, but inside the ruined tower, something bloomed fragile, dangerous, and more powerful than frost. Love, it was not loud, not spoken in promises. It was in the way Sira leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. It was in the way her children slept safely between them. It was in the quiet truth that, for the first time in years, Elias did not feel alone. He had spent his last credit on a blanket for a freezing widow. And now, that widow warmed his life in a way no coin could ever buy. The city of ChangedHis would forget him. The whispers would die in its alleys. But out here, beyond the walls, a new story had begun. A story not of hunger, not of betrayal, but of two lonely souls who found warmth beyond the cold. And as the fire burned low, Elias closed his eyes not in fear, not in despair, but in peace. For the first time, he was home.